So welcome everyone to Stamp Panels, moving beyond album collecting. I'm going to turn it over to Ken Lemke, who's our moderator, and he'll take some time to introduce our panelists, and we'll get started. Thanks for showing up. This wouldn't be possible unless people were interested.
Okay, we'll introduce Bill when he is able to arrive. Sid Mensinga, gee, we've all got beards, so wave, Sid. That's Sid. Sid is president of the West Toronto Stamp Club, and he's been that since 2014. And he's providing leadership for the West Toronto Stamp Club, which is a thriving club, and I can attest to that as a member. It has 100 members, and club membership has increased over by 25% over the past years. The club publishes a monthly bulletin held by a virtual single-page exhibit in the fall and provides a monthly learning workshop evening as well as a monthly discussion group. And I can tell you, I think they're open to the public, aren't they, Sid?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and they're great. So if you've never stepped in and listened to one, you should. He's a member of the Royal Postal History Society, BNAPS, and the CPS at GB, as well as various study groups. He would describe himself as a multiple project focused Canadian philatelist with a secondary interest in the Netherlands. He exhibits at the local club level. In 2019, winning the Club Everett Drake Trophy for his one frame exhibit, Higher Value Centennials, a sampling of rates. His current projects are the Postal History of Gravenhurst, Muskoka, POW Camp 20, Mail Service, and the Straight Jack Flag of 1897, a census study and analysis. The project description was recently published in the January 2021 issue of Maple Leaves, the Journal of the CPS at GB. He's a retired provincial educator, and he's been a school principal, and he's rather proud of 44 years as an educator. Ed Kroft, the other gentleman with a beard up there with the nice windows in behind, he's a lawyer, Queen's Counsel, and a fellow of the Royal Philatelic Society. Emma wants more cookies. There you go, Emma. Ed Kroft is currently an international level judge and president of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. He lives in Vancouver and has collected stamps for over 55 years. I assume you've done more than just collect stamps, Ed. He is the past president of the Society of Israel Philatelists and has been actively involved with that society for many years. Ed has written many articles for various philatelic publications relating to philately of the Holy Land and has successfully exhibited at the regional, national, and international levels. In 2012, Ed was the winner of the Regal Award of the Society of Israeli Philatelists for outstanding contributions to the Holy Land philately. Ed was also the 2013 Geldart Medal awarded by the Royal and the 2017 winner of the Jennings Award from the American Association of Philatelic Exhibitors. In 2020, Ed was the recipient of the Dick Stein Award of the SIP for outstanding philatelic writing and research. Ed is a member of many societies, including the APS, AAPE, the Royal, SIP, American Philatelic Congress and Postal History Society, the Postal History Society of Canada, the Philatelic Specialist Society of Canada, BNAPS and ONEPS, Collectors Club of New York, and the Holy Land Philatelic Society. His interests also include the postal history of the Holy Land, the Middle East, Canada, and aerophilately. Ed, I don't know how you have time to be a lawyer.
Thank you, Ken.
And there's Bill Longley. He's the one without a beard.
What about me?
We already have met you, Joe, and you're in Rome. Anyway, Bill, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Name's Bill Longley. I've been a collector since childhood. Joined Benaps in the PHSC at a young age, then eventually the Royal. I'm a dealer, auctioneer. Right now I'm working with Ken and Joe and a bunch of others on the CAPEX International exhibit that everyone make sure you get a chance to attend. I collect a wide range of areas. First time I exhibited, I showed an oddball collection of Uruguay, the Cephas issues, where I won the grand award first time out, which was a great joy. Currently act as the BNAP's publicity officer. I help with the social media. I'm the liaison for CAPEX. PHSC journal editor, PHSC co-chairman for this symposium, which has been canceled for July if you haven't heard. And I just live and breathe philately, and I especially like philatelic literature. I've got about 20 little sideline collections that are beyond the album collecting, and I'm going to hopefully share some of those with you and hopefully give you some inspiration.
Just Ken, before you start, I want to thank everyone again for showing up today. I want to thank the panelists. And I also want to thank Sparks Auctions for supporting us. And anyone wants to, they can go check it out at sparks-auctions.com. Thanks very much. Go ahead. Sorry, Ken.
I'm sorry, I thought you were still thanking Sparks.
Done. It's good.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll start with Sid. I think you were going to go first, Sid.
Okay. Let me just pull up my screen. Share screen. Make sure you can see my screen. Everyone see my screen? Right.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. My pleasure to be sharing with you this evening. And I think in many ways I represent a lot of collectors in the various clubs. I came back to this hobby in my late 50s and early 60s as I was anticipating retirement to say, what can I do that's of interest and will challenge me? And so I actually got back into stamp collecting at that time. But I soon moved away from album collecting when I saw the multiple opportunities that were available as a collector to say there are many ways I could delve deeper or to focus in on certain areas within my country of interest, which is Canada. So philatelic projects that were of my own choosing and connected to my own interests is what I see myself doing as a philatelist and as I learn and grow in this hobby. So I want to share with you some of my thoughts about this whole issue of collecting. Let's see if I can move some of this area. Oops, my apologies. Let's try to move something away from my screen here. Okay, so why would I collect? I just wonder whether you can see the top of my screen. Mine has some information in the way, but maybe I can move that. Let me just see. Yes, I can move that. Good. Does everyone see that black line that's in the way?
No.
No. Okay, that's good. It's just on my screen. Okay, so why would I want to do that? Why would I want to move away from album collecting? For me, it was seeing the many opportunities. So considering the multiple philatelic opportunities and challenges out there, I get to select the project, the scope of the project, and the parameters. So some of my projects are intense. Some of them are a lot less intense. Some of them are short-term projects that are have a short lifespan. Others are ongoing projects that go on for a long period of time. What I'd like to do today is to really give you a sense of and give you a glimpse into sort of three of the sort of project areas that I'd like to share with you, and to touch on some of my personal projects that I'm working on, and hopefully that they will inspire you and inform you to beyond the album possibilities that exist. So there are three areas that I'd like to share with you. One going beyond possible area is of course the many fantastic and terrific cancels, daters, and obliterators that we have. No matter what country you collect, there are just multiple types of cancellations available. So what can you do with all these? Well, there's various kinds of projects that you could actually be involved in as you study cancellations. So for me, an interesting cancellation type is the first one shown here, broken circle or the split ring cancellation. And for me, it's a fun project just to collect split ring cancellations on that 5-cent beaver number 15, 1859 stamp. What's challenging about the project is it's at first when you look at it, you say, oh, this is a very simple project. Well, really it's not, because this the daters were not to be on the stamp. The date was to be on the envelope, and the data was not to be used as an obliterator. So collecting these is a bit of a challenge. It's a fun short project. And of course, once you're into that project, you realize there's much more to this stamp than just the cancellation. The stamp itself has different kinds of perforations, different papers, and different varieties. So you'll soon get hooked into a deeper study, but a fun beginning study. Our second current study that I'm involved in, quite enjoying, is really looking at the postmarks and cancellation types for the district of Assiniboia. And I've shown here two cancellations, one for Grenville, ASA, and the other one is Wolseley, the square circle cancellation. Of course, there are other types of cancellations because the cancellations during this time period went from 1882 to 1905, so late Victoria, early Edward period. Many interesting cancellations. What I'm looking for, of course, is the location of the post office, who the postmaster was or postmistress was, the location of that post office within that particular community. Was it in a house? Was it in the store, etc.? And any other information about that particular post office. And the number of cancellations. They may have different cancellations. Some of them only had that split ring or the broken circle. They lasted that throughout the period. Speaking of square circle cancellations, you see the other one, the Gravenhurst cancellation there. There are, of course, different types of square circles you can collect, and for many, many types, excellent resources in that area. The Gravenhurst one is interesting to me. It's an area I'm studying, but that is an unknown cancellation, not recorded. It's on the Jubilee postal card. It's not recorded right now in the documents, but it's one that I need to inform the person who wrote the book about, that yes, this is a new find for me. So sometimes you find some rare and interesting cancellations, and it's all a study in itself. The different types, you can look at the continuity of use for this particular postmark, and of course indices and their varieties as well within each of those. And you could find them, of course, on cover or off. So a large area that could be studied. You can also do a more in-depth study, and for me, I did that with the slogan cancellation. Completed a study of I looked at the International Postal Supply Company slogans. The first year that slogan was put out was 1912. There were, the literature is not clear as to the number of post offices, the number of slogans. There was some debate amongst the different writers. So I did a more intense and in-depth study of this, charted all the known information, number of slogans, measurement of slogans, and how you could tell what sort of machine, which machine actually created the slogan, because there were both electric motor generated machines as well as hand crankers. So this is just an example of one of the pages. It shows that particular slogan for the Canadian National Exhibition. So I noted the Coots reference and all the information that was known about the slogan and its measurement. And I tried to draw some conclusions about measurements and the types of machines, and also confirmed that yes, there were 19 offices that produced 21 different slogans during the first year of use, 1912. The other amazing area to collect, of course, is the fantastic flag cancellations we have in Canada, the Imperial Obliterator dies. And you see there the Jubilee flag, Victoria 1897, F4. That's the Ottawa example. And there's only one type for Ottawa with data as shown, and with the 6 furls in there. In the first furl, there is actually 6 little lines. That shows you that's the die for Ottawa. Montreal had 2 different hubs. Actually, there's a third because there's a variety on one of those, and different dice. So there's different permutations and combinations you can actually get for flag cancellations, which makes it a very interesting area to study and to try to collect the different ones and on different, of course, covers as well. Completing a more in-depth study, and that's something I'm working on, is one of my colleagues introduced me to this cancellation. It really was very much for me an amazing cancellation, the straightjack flag F2 of 1896. It was only in use 12 days during the experimental period when we went from electric, so from hand canceled items and tools to electric generated machines. So the machine cancellations by the Imperial Mill Marking Machine Company produced this flag. This is the second flag, F2. And I'm looking at doing an in-depth study and analysis using actual images. There has been some information written about this particular cancellation, but it's limited, and there's not a census. So I'm working on compiling a census. So if you have this cancellation on a cover, please let me know. And of course, being from the Netherlands, for me, to collect something from the country where I was born is important as well. So I'm collecting Netherlands puntstempels, which are really cancellation types with really actually scar the stamp with these little holes. And it was used during 3 different issues of Netherlands definitive issues from 1869 to 93. And for me, the interesting part here is to try to connect it to towns, learning more about my homeland, because I left it, of course, when I was a young child. So the whole area of cancellations, no matter what country you collect, there's a huge number of potential projects at different levels. Moving on. The second area that's very interesting to me is to collect cancellations or that connect my love of reading, local history, and philately. A number of years ago, I worked in London, Ontario, and being an interest in local history, I visited a historic home called Eldon House, read the book that was published of the diaries by the matron of the home, Amelia Harris. And she wrote a very amazing diary. She was, first of all, she was the first cousin to Egerton Ryerson. Her husband died at a young age, and she raised 3 sons and 7 daughters to adulthood. So that was her challenge. And what my challenge is as a collector, she talks about in her book that there are many letters and correspondence coming into the house, was to match the covers that I could find to the contents of the diary, and then to really try to uncover the story behind the covers. So this is an example of a cover sent by her eldest daughter back to Amelia Harris in 1854, mourning the loss of her other daughter, Charlotte Cassie Owen Harris. And Cassie Owen Harris Knight was a passenger on the SS Ercolona, which sank in April 1854 as it collided with another ship in the Gulf of Genoa. She and her 2 young sons were drowned. So for me, the story behind is interesting, as it would be for you if you're collecting social sort of history with a social bent. And of course, also looking at the postmarks and recognizing the length of time it took to get from Liverpool for this stamp to arrive in London, Canada West. And then, of course, to learn something about the ship. It was carried by the Cunard Line and the Africa on trip 30. The dimensions of the ship and all the particulars of the ship are something you can discover, and to learn that it was in trip 30. So connecting that, a love of history, reading and philately is another sort of going beyond potential possibility for all of you as you look at your study. A third area of going beyond possibility is to look at a project that connects philately to family life, or to your heritage, your holiday, or your profession. And for me and my family, I've holidayed in Muskoka, Ontario, which is a beautiful lake area just north of the city of Toronto. We own a cottage there as well. My wife's family's had cottages there for many years. So for more than 50 years, I've traveled and holiday there for a good part of the summer. And before I was a stamp collector, I collected postcards of this town and have an extensive postcard collection for the town of Gravenhurst. Becoming more interested in philately, I'm now studying the development of the postal history for this town and the surrounding little villages that are now part of this particular town. So this is an example of the first known cover, December 2nd, 1868. The town was actually founded the post office founded in 1862, but the cancellation for that town is not existent. No one, they believe it might exist. Well, I believe I can prove it should exist. and might exist in 2 different iterations. So it's a matter of collecting the postal history of the town. In other words, who the postmaster was, where the post office was located, all the different kinds of cancellations, etc. I'm really trying to understand how all the different contracts with the mail carriers, looking at PMG reports, which are available to us through the Green Foundation and, of course, other sources. Of course, once you're into studying a town, you soon find that there are other rabbit holes you go down. And for me, that is an interesting secondary collection within my grave nurse collection, is to look at the postal history for the prisoner of war camp just outside of town. And this was quite a large German prisoner of war camp for German prisoners, all officers, opened in early 1940, and then collecting all the different types of mail that left that post office and were received. I believe I have quite a good little collection, enough almost to do an exhibit. I'm still looking for a few critical pieces, but a very interesting study. And actually nothing written about that, other than there was a book written about the camp itself, but nothing about how the mail service functioned within a prisoner of war camp and the importance of having that. So those are, again, some examples of how I'm looking at connecting my heritage and my sort of family connections to philately, but all of you can do that in your own way. So those are the 3 areas I wanted to highlight today. And I guess one final suggestion: it's a great resource I found, and it's available through Bean Apps to anyone. You don't need to be a member. It's called Canadian Philately and Outline, and it lists all different kinds of things to study and why you might study them in Canadian Philately. So that's my little contribution today. Okay.
Thank you, Sid.
I wonder, did I stay in my 10 minutes? I think I went over, but.
Yeah, you were about 20.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bill,
My apologies.
Bill, you're up.
We can't hear you, Bill.
Can't hear you. You're muted.
Can
There
you
we
hear
go.
me? Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Perfect.
we can even see you.
Perfect. Using my wife's computer, because I discovered my laptop at 10 minutes to didn't have PowerPoint on it. So as we get going, the important thing to remember and mark down is CAPEX going to occur June 9th, 12th, 2022 in Toronto at the Metro Toronto Convention Center. And how do I get rid of that?
There
Can
you
you
go.
see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I can see everybody else on the side, so I'm not sure if.
That's the way it works.
Okay. So we're going to talk about collecting beyond the album. And really what I wanted to do is, since a lot of us as collectors are already beyond it, we want to stop and pause for a minute and talk about the misconceptions that you might have going outside of your album. And the primary misconception is it will cost me more money. That's simply not true. Because if you think about a stamp album, you know, sort of the rule of diminishing returns, as you fill it and fill it and fill it, eventually you find holes that you can't afford to fill. So that acts as a brake mechanism that stops you from collecting and stops you from continuing, because now you can't afford that $200, $500, $5,000, $200,000 stamp. It happens to everybody at all levels. Another misconception is, well, everything has already been done. Well, I gave a talk to BNAPS a few months ago with the Golden Horseshoe group, and I threw out 15 new collecting areas that you could do. A lot of them touch on even thematics and stamp related, even though I'm sort of hardcore postal history, and that's what I enjoy. You know, there's plenty of subject matter that can be done with regards to actual postage stamps and stamp issues. Another misconception is I have to collect postal history, or I have to do plating, microscopic dots. The important thing is you do what you want. And then the final point is that you have to ultimately exhibit. Well, even that isn't true. You can still just enjoy regular stamp issues. You can enjoy putting things into a binder. Just because your album only holds one image doesn't mean you should only have necessarily one of those stamps. And basically, don't be limited by a stamp album that's like a bingo card, right? Just because someone efficiently put together some squares on a page shouldn't define how you enjoy philately. So one example is, and this comes from a bit of personal connection, I started collecting maybe when I was 8, and by the time I was 12, I was starting to get pretty serious. And I can remember the first stamp I bought was a 5-cent beaver. And then I remember how proud I was when I finally found a 3-pence beaver and put it in my album. But of course, those holes were still staring at me. So if you took just this one stamp and did it as a comparison, the types of things that you could collect are amazing. You can collect one of each, the laid, the wove, the perforated, and the regular 5-cent beaver, which also comes on a thick paper variety, all the different shades, all the different perforations, and a huge variety of re-entries and varieties, including some that haven't even been recorded, which was discussed on Facebook today. Someone says, why did someone pay $70 Canadian for this $5 5-cent beaver stamp? Well, the answer was because it was multiple re-entries and had a plate scratch on it. So there's lots of things to collect out there that everyone has an opportunity to enjoy. Again, just sticking with the beaver example, you could spend your entire life and a lot of money collecting nothing but postmarks on the beaver. Colored cancels, 4-ring cancels down in the bottom corner here. Blue cancels, that's a 4-ring 19. This is a very rare pre-cancel, steamboat mail, and even multiples with 4-ring numerals on them. Next slide. So what I wanted to do is everybody looks at a stamp or postal history differently. So I want to take this one example and walk through with you in terms of how you could enjoy it from many different angles. Here's a 5-cent beaver stamp. A little bit off center, not the greatest thing, but it's a nice, clear, red, full impression. It's not the later worn plate. So that's something that you could pull off and identify. Let's look a little closer. It's a 5-cent beaver, but if you look closely, it actually has a 4-ring cancel, which through our lists and our references, we know is 4-ring 30 from Peterborough. And it's actually on a cover. So if you collect postal history, you have the chance to discover where it was from, to and from. So this cancel has a rarity factor 5 out of 1 to 10, which is located in the Unitrade catalog. And from my own research, because I used to collect this was paid to a charge box or paid to a drawer. And that actually says paid drawer 7. It's not 73, it's 7, and that's a squiggle, like a final finesse. And it's dated July 1st, 1859, which makes us think even further as a postal historian. Post Office Department Circular number 45, this is a copy of it from the online archives, points out that the stamps were issued on July 1st, 1859, and the rate was 5 cents per half ounce. So that's pretty cool. And if you haven't figured it out already, it's a first day cover. So this was found tucked away in someone's collection, unappreciated, but with knowledge and research, and depending on your area of interest, you can make some fabulous discoveries. And rarity equals money, and money equals rarity. But the important thing that I really want to share, having been a collector for more than 40 years and a dealer part-time or full-time for more than 30, is money doesn't equal happiness. And it's true in philately. You can have just as much fun with a 5-cent stamp as you can with a $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 cover. The next example I wanted to share with you is a few areas that I collect. Right now, this weekend, I've been slugging away mounting my exhibit for CanPEX, which is the virtual online show in London, but happening virtually, London, Ontario. And I collect these particular postmarks, these solid rings that slowly wore away. And if you look at the bottom one, you can see the outer rim is slowly wearing away. That's because it was an electrotype hammer. The metal is very weak, and it slowly wore away over time. And this started to give you a story about how you discover something. was, as the editor of PHSC, I wanted to write an article about the Postal History Society of Canada's postmark database and why it's so good and why it's useful. So I picked a cover up and I looked it up and I said, see, boys and girls, you can go and use this database. And I went, uh-oh, that's a new early date. Okay, well, I'm going to put that aside. I'll have to update that data on the database. I picked up a different one to use as an example for my article. Uh-oh, that's a new late date. So I sort of fell into this niche beyond the album because I was writing an article about how great the database was, and I now find out it can be improved. So now I'm doing a census of all of these postmark devices, and now I've entered it in CanPEX for the competition. Another area is stamps. This is the 3 cent on 2 cent provisional stamp. And surprise, this is my own collection. This is something I collect. I'm sharing this with you. A lot of people don't know I collect it. I have a lot of little collections. And the point is, a lot of times when people try to convince someone like, well, how can I go beyond? The only part of the story that you typically hear is the end point, where someone shows you a beautifully mounted exhibit and you say, well, how do I get there? For me, the best thing that works are a stock book or stock pages like this. You sort and organize, and as you get more, you can put them in order. And here's my, I mean, this is original. I didn't make this up. This is from an album or from a stock book that I'm using, collecting these. Those are the plate positions that I need. There's some varieties on the right. And of course, I love postal history. So there's one, and a beautifully rare Trinidad postage due used on a cover to Trinidad. So the point is, it's not this quantum leap from beyond your album to a finished collection or exhibit. It's a process that you're going to enjoy. And that includes references, dealer connections, understanding what you want to collect, identifying what's out there as that collectible, and then making a pathway towards acquiring it, all under the guise of it being affordable, that it doesn't become a burden to yourself financially and then you quit. Because there's no sense trying to collect something that's outside of your budget, because it'll just, you know, it will end in disaster. I've personally seen that on more than one occasion. These are 2 other exhibit pages. Just for fun, about 2 years ago, I decided I want to do just a little mock-up of cancellations by type. So here's a page I just made. I bought these 2 nice little covers. In fact, I got them from Frank Hoyles at a show on March 14th, 2020. It was the last stamp show before COVID, and the very next day we were in shutdown. So there's a bit of a COVID connection with that. So I have multiple pages like this where I show court cancels, flag cancels. It's just a one-of collection, just for fun. The other one on the right is sort of a cultural connection, and it's just a sample page. I decided I was going to take the lyrics to the song, the Tragically Hip, the 100th Meridian, and I was going to find a cover that went along with each line. And it was just something fun to do, and it was one of my my favorite ones. And it started partially because I had that Buffalo Pan Am exposition at top, and I just liked it so much I didn't want to sell it. And then I remembered the line from the song, and that's what got me to start collecting that. And so the key from that is there's always a cue that will send you off in a direction. But the important point is it doesn't have to be rigid. And like Sid said very correctly, you can have short-term collections and longer-term ones. And these ones are short-term for fun, and then I'll move them along and find something different to collect. And stepping back even further in the collecting thing, these are just 2 pages I threw on the scanner bed this afternoon. Here's something else I collect that some people don't know. I collect first day covers of the John McCrae Flanders Field stamp. Because I like it, because it's a part of history, because it's classic Canadian iconic, but also there's a personal connection. My daughter, when she was the curator at the high school museum they started, we drove up to McCrae House in Guelph, and we borrowed John McCrae's medals on loan for 2 weeks at the high school, which was incredible. And Ian Robertson wrote an article about it in the Toronto Sun at the time. And then the one on the right is something very peculiar and just sort of crazy collecting. Is before the postal code were the zones. So if you see this one, it was just addressed Toronto, Ontario. And then someone wrote 3, correcting it with the street address, and the directory service had been given. And then, of course, there's a multitude of little pamphlets and flyers they distributed. Your zone is 341. And then one other area that I collect are post office related things. I collect postal guides, reports of the Postmaster General, post office advertising material like the one you see below. And I also collect the new postcards, the COVID postcards, if you will, that were given out, 6 French and 6 English. But the important point to take away from this slide is, again, you're not going to go from the album to a completed collection. You're going to enjoy the journey. You're going to enjoy collecting and learning. And I should also point out that the middle cover on the right-hand side, you'll notice it's addressed to the Allen Bedding Company. And that cover was addressed to Alan Steinhardt, who owned a mattress company before he got into the stamp business. And finally, the thing that if I could leave you with from my experience is books really are the best kept secret of collecting. It's something that will multiply your enjoyment of the hobby, no matter what subject it is. And there's probably a book out there that will help you. I'm also the BNAPS book department representative. BNAPS publishes books, but there's thousands and thousands of books, and they're really quite affordable and quite cheap. And there's so much information available online as well that you can access, that once you've decided some areas that you're going to collect, I think the first and most important thing that I could ever tell you to do is go find what literature is available. You would be shocked at the number of customers and collectors I know who've been collecting for 20, 30, 40 years, and they're collecting something very specialized and very expensive, and they don't have the fundamental book. And so knowledge is power, it's true. So that's what I would very much encourage you to do. Don't let someone else tell you what to collect. Feel around the area, find a few areas, research the material, the prices, the literature that's available, try it for a little while, and then make a decision, go forward. And like Sid said, you could have some short-term collecting goals and some longer-term ones, and it doesn't always have to lead to an exhibit. So that's the end of my talk. I hope you've got some inspiration, and if you have any questions, we'll have some answers, I presume, at the end. I'll turn it back over to you now.
Sorry, Ken, we can't hear you.
I turned it off because Emma wanted something. Thank you, Bill. And Ed, you're up next.
Thanks very much, Ken. And thanks to Sid and thanks to Bill for those great presentations. I learn a lot every time I watch one of these things, and I learned a heck of a lot from watching you guys. So I'll do my best to entertain people for the some of the rest of the time. Welcome to people from coast to coast. Thank you on behalf of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada for attending these talks. Thanks to Joe for putting them together and managing them. And thanks to Sparks Auctions for its sponsorship of them. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to talk about a topic that's going to cover some of what both Sid and Bill both spoke of. And I moved away from album collecting a number of years ago, quite a number. I still have many albums. I'm interested in many things, but I'm going to talk to you today about postal history. And the reason I'm going to talk to you about postal history is because that's what I'm passionate about. And I look at the roster of people who are attending this talk, and a number of you are very experienced collectors, exhibitors, postal historians in your own right. But for those of you who aren't as familiar with the topic, and going to what Sid and Bill spoke of, you know, postal history is rates, routes, remarks, aspects of the historical development of postal services. And a lot of people like this because they're interested in detail, they're interested in history, they're interested in geography. But when you collect postal history, you don't just collect stamps and covers, you collect all sorts of things, ephemera, postal stationery, postal cards, newspapers, wrappings, tags, anything that's been handled by the postal system that impacts on the topic that you want to collect about. Now, when you're collecting your postal history, you might find maps or forms or catalogs or historical documents like decrees that will help you better understand the topic that you're collecting. And when you're collecting postal history, you're in effect a social historian. Your interest will go beyond rates, routes, markings, cancellations, postmarks. And I would advert you to the American Philatelist from the February issue and a tremendous stamp chat talk by the American Philatelic Society on the connections between postal history and social history. We, as collectors of covers and other philatelic ephemera, were custodians of important historical artifacts. And you saw Sid demonstrate some, you saw Bill demonstrate some. And what I'm going to talk to you about for the remaining time in my talk is about one thing, and something that's very important to all of you, and that is vaccines. So what you see up on the screen right now is a cover from the state of Israel, and it portrays a gentleman named Hafkind. And a lot of you don't know this, but Hafkind is someone that you should be very happy existed in this world. Hafkind was an immunologist. He helped save the world in the 19th century. He found vaccines for cholera and bubonic plague. And if it wasn't for Hafkind, chances are we wouldn't be looking for COVID-19 vaccines, because Hafkind was the kind of guy who would stab himself with a needle in order to try to create immunology against some of these diseases. He was commemorated on stamps from Israel and from India, where he worked tirelessly for many years. Now, here's the stamp from Israel that was issued in 1994. And just to tell you, Hafkind was born in 1860. He died in 1930. But between 1893 and 1902, as the slide points out, he inoculated thousands and thousands of people in India against cholera, bubonic plague, and his vaccines were shipped around the world. And when I say shipped, his technologies were shipped around the world. People sought advice from him from everywhere. He was knighted by Queen Victoria, and he was a pioneer of immunology. And we should all be grateful to him, because he was the one who came up with the concept of inoculating yourself with some of the culture of the diseased material. So what we know of now from Hafkind ultimately is being used in one way or another, at least in some small way, by the various vaccine makers whom we're all itching to have inoculate us if you've already not had the benefit of inoculation against COVID. And what you will see on the tab, the selvage that Israel put out, is an excerpt from Hafkind's own journal, which said what to do against the plague in India by Hafkind. And he talks about the presence of the plague in India. And so you look at this, you have it in your stamp album, and you go, that's a stamp, it's okay, it looks okay, maybe it looks pretty weird, maybe it isn't the prettiest of stamps. Do I really want to collect this or not? But here's what I collect. Here's a cover from 1904 from Jaffa, Palestine, addressed to Dr. Hafkind, looking for Dr. Hafkind. So some of you will look at this document and you will say, whoops, sorry about that. We'll look at this document and say, boy, this is really an ugly document. You know, if I was going to Bill, he'd probably give it to me for $5 because it's all marked up. And Bill's shaking his head. He'd say, okay, for you, Ed, it'll be $50. But nonetheless, this is a unique piece. because as we're going to see as we look at this cover, that this cover traveled around the world looking for Dr. Halfkind. Because as you will see in a few minutes, not very long actually, there was a cholera epidemic in Palestine in 1902, and they were desperately searching for Dr. Halfkind to provide the vaccine for people there. And that's the reason this cover was sent. So let's look at the postal history underlying what looks like Emma walked over the cover after she was outside in the rain, you know, going to you, Ken, you know, because it looks like a dog tracked all over this cover. So what's going on here? Number one, the Society of Carmel Oriental of Jaffa mailed this imprinted stationery cover. That society was founded in 1902, and its purpose was to market wine. And there's the imprint right at the top. They made some extraordinary wine that was famous throughout the Middle East at the opening of the 20th century. Number two, for the postal history collectors among you, you want to look at stamps. You want to look at registration. Okay, for you, I've got the corner of the cover. I've got Austrian piasters. I've got a 1 and 2 piaster stamps. These were Austrian stamps that were overprinted because the denominations used in the Middle East at the time in Palestine were Ottoman, were Turkish. That's why you have the references to the piasters as opposed to the currency that was actually printed on the stamp. Now to the left, you will see the registration label, a beautiful registration label from Jaffa, from the Austrian Post, number 425. So the postal history collectors among you will go, he's shown me the rate, which is the foreign letter rate for a registered cover out of Palestine. Oh, where's it going? Can you really tell? Oh, look, it's going to Bombay. That's where it's going, but it's struck out. And you can't even tell where it's possibly going. Well, let's go to the next slide. The stamps show that they were canceled with an Austrian cancel. There's the Austrian cancel out of the Austrian Jaffa post office. And some of you may know that the Ottoman Empire, by virtue of what were called the foreign capitulation treaties, allowed foreign post offices to occupy the country. So there were Russian post offices, French post offices, Italian post offices, Austrian post offices, German post offices in Palestine, which operated in addition to the Ottoman Post. Now you've got a Jaffa cancellation up in the top left corner, and you've also got one down below indicating the date upon which the letter was mailed, which was in 1904, the 25th day of May, 1904, 5/25/04. We go to the next point. All of a sudden, we say, what happened here? And we see in red ink, gone to London, right here. So the letter missed Dr. Halfkind, Professor Halfkind, by 3 weeks by virtue of the cancellations and the markings that were on it. We go to the next date, July 4th, 04. The cover arrives in London. Here it is, down in the left corner. The cover arrives in London and it's marked Ludgate Circus, London. So now it's gone from Palestine over to London. What's next for this cover? Oh, there's a redirection in black ink to the Thomas Cook Company in London. Where is that? Right up in the middle here. So notice I'm dissecting the cover piece by piece in order to find out what happened to it. Then after it goes to London in July of 1904, remember we started in May, in July, we go to Germany. So this cover now travels from Palestine to England to Germany. And how do we find that? Sorry to make you dizzy here. We see that on the back of the cover. So we see that now up here is the German cancel. that's going up in the top left corner, up in the back. Because let's face it, everyone, they ran out of a room on the front. So they just had to start using the back to try to play with it. And then after it goes to Germany, they send it to India on my birthday, albeit that I wasn't born in 1904. So, and there's the marking on the back on July 11th in India, where it was sent. So it was going to India, it went to India, was sent from India back to London, over to Germany, back to India, and then it's redirected back to Germany on the back of the cover. So where do we see that? Sorry. We see that it's redirected back to Germany, and there's this label that's put on and all this writing that says, get rid of this thing. And you see the label here, inconnu, unknown, that they couldn't find this person. So finally, what happens at the end? It goes all over the place. It goes to a travel agency in Germany. The German label was put on, inconnu, unknown. Then there was a black written instruction, which was that label on the cover. And then finally, what happens after all that's done, it goes to Egypt, to Port Said in Egypt, on its way back to Jaffa and that's the last marking on the cover. Whoops, that's there. So what happened overall here? It took 93 days for this cover to start out and end up in the same place. And Dr. Haffkine never got it. So for those of you who are passionate about postal history, I've shown you rates, routes, markings, all sorts of things. But what I care about almost more than anything here is, why was this letter sent? There was a cholera epidemic in late October, November 1902. I've gone back into the New York Times. I've gone into the Los Angeles papers and have seen write-ups about the cholera epidemic in Palestine, you know, papers in Palestine talking about this. And from my research, I determined that the head of medicine in the Palestine Jewish community had been communicating with Haffkine about the need for vaccine in Palestine. So I folded over that sticker that had been put on to try to see who was on the back flap. And there was nothing that actually was on the back flap. It looks like you've got some German here that's somewhat hard to discern, you know, in terms of the writing that might have been put on by the German authorities. One thing I didn't point out to you, here's a censorship marking, you know, on the cover, the V that was applied often in Palestine at the appropriate times. So what do I really care about? The postal history, the social history, and as a person who loves research, I always come up with a bibliography. And here are some articles written about Haffkine. And the article that's so interesting, aside from the philatelic article written by Michael Kaltman, which was an excellent article about this cover, is this article that was in the BBC. Valdemar Haffkine, the vaccine pioneer the world forgot. Amidst COVID, his name has started to surface. And those, Ken, are my remarks about that.